what is the what is your idea? What is your experience that this corporate learning model, I mean, its model, can be implemented in the companies? Means that are there some requirements from those companies in order to implement this its model to be a successful model in the companies? Because not all companies are ready for the time being to implement this model. Yes,
yeah, well, I think the Saka, the each model there is not really it's not about learning at the end of the day. It's more of a sort of a mindset in terms of if you designed your HR policies through that or HR practices through that lens of, you know, employees as adults, consumers, and human beings, you'd end up with things that are different to what we typically do. Let me give you some examples to try and bring it to life. And because, you know, it informs a lot of what we do, not just on the learning side. But for example, if you're going to treat employees as adults, right? So let me use my favorite example, which is corporate expenses policies. Okay, normally corporate expenses policies are, you know, 5 pages long, and it'll give you a long list of what you can and you can't claim, and it'll you know, ask for receipts, and it'll assume that you're, you know, the sort of underlying assumption is that I need to treat you like a child and not as an adult to define everything you can do, as opposed to Netflix's corporate expenses policy, which is my favorite. It's one sentence: treat the company's money as if it was your own. Now that's treating you as an adult, right? Because it's just asking you to use your common sense as to what you claim and how you claim it. Or you know, another sort of example for me is, and again, I use Netflix as another example, but you know, the annual leave policy of many organizations is hard to navigate or unclear, or it's got lots of conditions or whatever it might be. Netflix's annual leave policy basically says take as much leave as you want, right? And surprise, surprise, when they issued that policy, the number of people taking leave went down because, you know, people were making their own judgments about how much annual leave they needed. If I look through the lens of consumers, you know, there are adult employees as consumers. There are two, you know, what do, you know, consumers want today? They want choice, right? So, and indeed they want, you know, if you think of all the sort of the consumer technologies that you engage with in your day, in your life, like your banking website or your, you know, the e-commerce site or whatever it might be, the technology is very easy to use and very straightforward. And compare that to your average HR system, you know, so again, if thinking about, you know, how consumer grade is our technology, our HR technology, thinking about how do I give my employees more choice in what they're. So, for example, we were the first company in Hong Kong to offer flexible benefits to our employees, where, you know, you can trade off health insurance for, you know, a cheaper package because you've got no kids or whatever it might be, and you can go and buy more life insurance, or, you know, you can buy and sell annual leave and things like that, so that people can tailor the benefits that they want to suit their life stage. So I think that's an example of treating, you know, employees as consumers, and then employees as human beings, you know, never more so than the last 2.5 years in terms of what the COVID policies have been in many companies. And, you know, we've all read the horrible stories of people not being given sick leave, or you know, they've been asked to take quarantine leave out of their annual leave or whatever it might be, as opposed to, well, you know, in the Jardine's case, I don't think I've ever seen a more, you know, employee-centric response to all of the, in terms of the humanity, if you like, and the compassion that we showed in terms of the way. So, you know, I think this each model, Saka, is not just, you know, through the lens of learning. I think from a learning perspective, I think one of the very key ones for us was the was the point about consumer choice and personalization, and you know, if I'm a data analytics person, and upskilling things that, you know, are relevant to me and personalized to my sort of competency level and all that sort of stuff. And as we start to think about how we configure our learning systems, you know, they need to be consumer grade from a UX UI perspective, but B, they need to sort of tailor the content for me, as an example. I don't know if that answered your question.
Yes, it's a really very good answer. There is one question from the participant from VAS. Thank you, Peter, for your sharing. From your experience, how do you make business connections with the data that you gather from various type of demand learning? That's the first question, I believe. The second one, what is the tangible KPIs, key performance indicators, that business is looking forward in measuring learning / people capabilities? And the third one is, how do you measure the people performance? Okay, please, Peter.
Yeah, so I guess a number of ideas locked up in that. You know, I think the you know, at one level of sort of measuring learning effectiveness, the sorts of things that I showed on my last slide in terms of, you know, learning transfer, satisfaction with the learning, recommendation, etc., which is all, you know, I know, you know, not necessarily talking about impact on the business, but it's talking about impact of the learning. You know, those sorts of measures are obviously important, and things that we look at to make sure our programs and our learning partners are delivering things that impact, right? I think, you know, for me, the whole idea of, you know, how do you measure return on investment of learning? It's a bit like the holy grail of measurement, in my opinion. There are examples around of vendors that try to do that in terms of, you know, and we have a couple of examples of that where, you know, we've looked at, you know, participants have said, well, I was, you know, 15% more effective when I got back to work because I did your program, and we then sort of extrapolated that against their salary cost, and we said, and therefore the return, you know, that we've got 15% more value from those people, and we correlated that back to the cost of the learning, and you end up with, in my opinion, spurious statistics, which I don't like to use, quite frankly. In terms of ROI. So we don't bend over backwards to try and prove, you know, that we've added X% to the bottom line or whatever it might be. That said, I think, you know, there are specific programs like, and you know, we don't do these at the group level, but for example, sales training. You know, I assume that if you're investing a lot in sales training as an organization, you know, you'd expect to see an increase in sales, right? And there are obvious things like that where, you know, I guess organizations should be tracking return on investment. The other thing that we look at quite a lot is, you know, a lot of our learning programs have action learning components to them, where, you know, people will work on projects or things back at work after they've been on the learning program, and we do track those, right? So, you know, for example, we know that through our Digital and Innovation Academy last year that there were about, I think the number was about 75 or something, action learning projects that actually resulted in some sort of improvement in the business, right? And you know, we track those, we sort of tell stories about those to get people interested and excited, etc. So, you know, I think that's just in terms of learning measurement. I think the last part of the question about how do you track people performance? Well, I guess like any other organization, we have a performance management process, and you know, we look at the outcomes of that process. We also specifically track achievement against development plans. So, you know, we know if people are sort of delivering on the development that they said they were going to put in place. So, I guess not a brilliant, for me, this whole measurement thing is it's important, and we do lots. But again, I don't want to, there's a lot of intangibles in here as well, I think. And I don't want to sort of slavishly be held to account for, some bottom line impact when I know measuring it is bordering on impossible. For me, if senior business leaders across Jardines are saying your learning is having an impact, Peter, that's enough for me. So I hope that sort of answers the question, Vas.
Yes, it's really a very good answer. There are also some questions from the participants now. Aji, could you explain about learning path practice in relation with career path that implemented in a company? Maybe I should combine the first question and the second one, okay? From Median, Ita Agustin. Thank you, Peter, for sharing. How do you manage a tacit knowledge in learning and development program? There are any tips for maintain that tacit knowledge to implicit knowledge? Those two questions, maybe they are quite interrelated. So if you can really answer those two questions at the same time, maybe it will be quite useful. I mean, in order to make a certain kind of interrelations among knowledge for the participants. I mean, for the participant knowledges. Thank you.
Yeah. Career paths and how that relates to learning. So, just to perhaps use an example to try and talk about this. So last year we did a big piece of work with our digital and innovation and IT community across Jardines to look at, answer the question, how do you build a career in those areas across Jardines? What are the building blocks of a career? If you aspire to be the chief digital officer one day, what do you need to do by way of experiences and by way of skills that do you need to have? So if I just take the sort of the skills side of that for a second, we identified, I think it was six different building blocks of a career in these areas. And within those 6 building blocks, we identified 80 skills, digital skills that were part of that. And obviously there was a bit of a matrix then of, in this career building block, there are these, 15 skills. And in this career building block, there are these, 20 skills or whatever it might be. And, depending on your aspiration from a career standpoint, it becomes quite clear what the skills are that you need to have as you build your career. And indeed, at what sort of proficiency level you need to have them. Do you need to just have basic understanding, or do you need to have more expertise? So, that we've obviously taken that work, and as we, shape the curriculum of the Digital Academy, as we start to look at, learning pathways for different roles. So again, I mentioned in my presentation that one of the big areas for us at the moment is data analytics, right? And, we have identified a number of roles within that area, that domain, where we're building sort of specific learning pathways based on the skills that we know our people need in those areas. So, I guess that's an example of how we're linking, how you build a career with the sort of the skills development and the learning pathways that run alongside that. There's also, of course, what I've just been talking about is technical skills, right? Professional skills in digital IT innovation. But of course, there are leadership competencies and capabilities that you that you need to be developing as you become more senior, which is where the Leadership Academy programs that I talked about before come into play as well. So, in addition to sort of improving your data analytics skills, you'll also need to go to the relevant program that is going to help you work on the soft skills, the leadership skills that you need. So that's one dimension. I think on the tacit knowledge bit, I think this is an interesting area, I think, and it's one of the for any of the companies on the Zoom meeting that have an LXP platform, a learning experience platform. It was actually, I think, one of the key selling points for a platform like this was you had the ability to tap into the tacit knowledge of your subject matter experts and build repositories of knowledge, repositories of information, learning pathways, whatever it might be, that takes the sort of tacit knowledge from people and codifies it right in a platform. And many of the global clients, to give you one example, I think the biggest global client of Edcast company in India, I think they have something like 80 or 90 even subject matter expertise channels in their platform, where they've got subject matter experts from across the business, networks of them, sort of building content, learning content, or just knowledge, taking knowledge out of their brains and putting it into the platform so that it's there. We haven't been very successful at that in Jardines yet. But it remains an ambition for us to try and get this tacit knowledge out of people's heads and get it into a platform where it becomes part of corporate memory. So I hope that answers the question, Medion. I see another one here, Saka from Slamet. Yes. Shall I answer that one?
Yes, yeah. Please.
So, look, I don't think there is a right or wrong answer about what's more effective between online and offline. I think both have their place. I think we'll all be happy for the day when we can get back to do some face-to-face learning again. I think we're all sick of being on Zoom or e-learning modules or whatever it might be. Obviously, but that said, I think the future is blended. Obviously there are things that lend themselves to more online training, knowledge transfer, testing, understanding, all of those things. But obviously there's also a place for face-to-face or virtual live or whatever, which is applying that learning, discussion, action learning, et cetera, et cetera. So, I think there's no hard and fast answer to that question. I think there's an element of experimentation here as well as to what works for you. All companies are probably a bit different in this space.
Yes, there is also, please. Yes, there is also another question from PGB, Rinda Prima. Nice presentation, Peter. How to manage and monitor the talent team in your department? And number 2, how to ensure that employees are highly involved in the talent management program? Quite a good question, Peter. Please.
Yeah, well, how to manage and monitor the talent team? Well, I'm not sure the talent team's different to any other team, really. We have a strategy, we set an agenda, we set our goals for the year, we manage. I'm not sure the gist, what's behind the question. Maybe you could drop it into the chat if I didn't really. I'm not answering the question, but for me, it's, as I say, any team for me is the same. We know where we're going. We have a direction. We have a vision. We set some goals around it, and we get on with it. I think the second part of the question is interesting in terms of, how do we bring to life for our employees everything that we do in talent management? And I'd venture to suggest that in many organizations, this is a bit of a black box, and there's lots of so-called secret practices about how we manage high potentials or how we manage performance, or how people get promoted, or how we do succession planning, or, all of those sorts of things. And in fact, one of the things that we've just agreed for Jardines is that we're going to be significantly more transparent on all of that in the future. So we're going to demystify this black box of how all of our talent processes work. We're going to tell people what we're looking for. We're going to tell people how we assess performance. We're going to tell them how we, identify potential. We're going to tell them how they get into succession plans, etc. Because, I think the point is right in your question, that, we want our people to feel that their careers are being actively managed and that we value them as talent. And, particularly in today's, the great resignation that, we're reading a lot about today, if people don't feel the love from the organization that they're working for, they'll just go somewhere else who loves them more, right? So I think this is a very important question. I'm not sure if I answered the first question, but if I didn't, please sort of ask me another question in the chat. But
yes, there is also one question again from the participant, from VAS again. Question: can you share any tips for talent development / learning chief to cultivate foresight / horizon scanning skills to build talent strategists? And the second one is from Danik Putri. Maybe we can combine, Perdani. Thank you, Peter, for your nice presentation. How can we overcome the learning loss from learners when they follow most online learning in the pandemic era? Please, Peter.
So, look, I think the first question is a great question. It's a topic very dear to my heart. I spend a lot of time, and I tell my team the same, that there's a big world out there, and you need to understand what's going on in that big world, because particularly in with what's been going on with the Great Resignation and COVID and demographic changes and all of that. There's the rate of innovation, the rate of change in all these areas is massive. So I don't think there's any substitute here, Vas, for you need to read. You need to be part of global networks, not just local networks. I don't belong to any networks in Hong Kong. I only belong to global or regional networks, because I really want to get a broader perspective about what's going on. I spend a lot of time talking to our learning partners, or our talent partners, some of the consultancies. I speak to a lot of academics about what's going on in academia. I speak to all the big consultancies about what's going on in their world, and I think the sort of all of that is super important. External focus, particularly for any of you that are in HR expertise roles like talent or learning or reward or whatever it might be. You need to do that. Learning loss. Yeah, this is obviously we've all read the stats, right? You go on a learning program and you forget whatever it is, 80% of what you learned the next day, or whatever the stats are. I think there are ways to sort of mitigate that, obviously, in the way you design the learning. So, taking quizzes, for example, or sort of, linking in some sort of action learning type project that is relevant to what you learned. Something that we're experimenting with at the moment is, and it's something that we saw from one or two of the consultancies, actually, and what they were talking about is we're experimenting with the notion of sort of bronze, silver, gold badging, so that if you complete an e-learning program, you get a bronze badge. So well done, thank you for completing the program. However, if you then go and apply that learning and you can demonstrate how you applied that learning in your work, you get a silver badge. And if you then go and teach others what you learned, you get a gold badge. And we're sort of, it's early days in our thinking about how we're actually going to operationalize that yet, because it's not very simple. But I think we're sort of to the point of your question. We're trying to find ways that to get people to reinforce the learning that they've had. And again, I think it also depends on the type of learning that if it's something that people need for their day job and it's about keeping up to speed with, changing regulations or new ways of, calculating things or whatever, then obviously the learning needs to be consistent and regular and you mitigate against learning loss because it's frequent and regular. But in other areas where, it's not driven by daily routines or changes, etc., then, as I say, I think this notion of bronze, silver, gold is something that we're starting to have a think about.
Yes, thank you, Peter.